Hey there, welcome to Film in the Blink. My name's Ian, I watch a lot of movies, here's everything I've been watching lately. I started things off with Scream 7, written by Kevin Williamson and Guy Busick, and directed by Kevin Williamson. The Scream franchise was a pillar of my cinematic education growing up, but sadly even Neve Campbell and Kevin Williamson in person couldn't save Scream 7 from cratering before me. It isn't just bad, it's awful. The fun is gone, the world of the film feels empty, and its sloppy, forced trudge of a plot is capped off by a killer reveal that genuinely made me embarrassed for the franchise. Get Kevin Williamson as far away from this franchise he helped create as possible. 1.5 stars. Then A Nun with a Gun in 1981's Miss 45, written by Nicholas St. John and directed by Abel Ferrara. Abel Ferrara knocked my socks off with Bad Lieutenant, so I wanted to check out this other cult classic of his, following a mute woman's evolution into a murderous vigilante of men after being brutally assaulted twice in one day. Zoe Lund in the title role plays each stage of her mental descent beautifully, especially without any dialogue to rely on. Her silence evolves from weakness in the beginning of the film to power as the film goes on. Just a great arc for a great character. 4 stars. Up next, a true cinematic heavy hitter, 1931's City Lights, written and directed by Charlie Chaplin. City Lights is the only boxing movie brave enough to show how dangerously flirty you get before a fight. It's also an impeccably polished, joyful salute to love in its purest form, structured around some of Charlie Chaplin's most well-oiled bits of slapstick. It all goes down in a smooth, bubbly way, even though Chaplin manages to weave in heavier topics like poverty, alcoholism, and depression. It's a treat start to finish, and I can't believe it's almost a century old. 5 stars. Then I watched The Play, written and directed by Charlie Pollinger. As a recovering teenage boy, I'm qualified to say that we all dance weird and bully senselessly because our brains are bad and dumb. Hope that helps. Like all great, darkly funny psychological thrillers, The Plague knows when to let you laugh at the sea of painful adolescence on display and when to twist the knife to show the more sinister underbelly of Gen Alphas. I loved all the slow-mo underwater shots that make you feel like you're looking at the boys under a microscope, suspended like some primitive amoeba struggling to survive, but my favorite element has to be that amazing score composed entirely of creepy a cappella voices echoing off the tile walls. It's the perfect sickly cherry on top of this chlorine-soaked sundae. 4.5 stars. Then over to 1993's Judgment Night, written by Lewis Colick and directed by Stephen Hopkins. This is pretty lifeless 90s schlock, but I absolutely love that for a movie that predominantly takes place in the sewers and back alleys of Chicago, the filmmakers were like, where do we want this final big fight to be? A delicate glassware, rustic pottery, fragile wind chime warehouse? Is that a thing? Yeah, let's just go with that. 2 stars. Up next, some World War II tinged noir with 1944's To Have and Have Not, written by Jules Furthman and William Faulkner, and directed by Howard Hawks. There are film debuts, and then there's 18-year-old Lauren Bacall slinking her way onto the screen with the presence of an all-time great twice her age, dropping one of the most badass lines in film history, and then starting the most iconic Hollywood romance with Humphrey Bogart. 3.5 stars. Then some vibrant animated sci-fi with Arco, written by Hugo Bienvenu and Félix de Givry, and directed by Hugo Bienvenu and Gilles Cazot. I really loved this. Arco is a dynamic, inventive ride with gorgeous visuals and one of my favorite scores of the year, and it's under 90 minutes? God damn. Fair warning though, it's essentially Interstellar for kids, so get ready to feel your feelings. 4 stars. Next, another also ran for this year's animated Oscar, Little Amélie or the Character of Rain, written by Lian Cho Han, Mylise Fayyad, Odd Pai, and Adine Noel, and directed by Lian Cho Han and Mylise Fayyad. Little Amélie is a beautifully animated film that for my money should have walked away with the animated feature Oscar this year. It makes life feel so grand, visually, metaphysically, creatively. It nails the wonder of early childhood with a delicate finesse that allows the warmth of the film to seep out and touch you. Also, not for nothing, I don't think the color green has ever looked as good as it does in this. 4.5 stars. Then Bette Davis fully off the leash in 1964's Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, written by Henry Farrell and Lucas Heller and directed by Robert Aldrich. Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte is no Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. It hits a lot of the same beats of isolation, mental illness, and hagsploitation, and even ups the ante in terms of the visuals with all of the interrogation room lighting blanketing most of the key scenes. And yet, it doesn't crackle like Baby Jane does. Bette Davis obviously delivers, casually reinventing the concept of screaming like 8 different times over the course of the film. For more absolutely batshit Bette Davis behind-the-scenes lore, go check out the IMDb trivia on this one, it won't disappoint. 3.5 stars. Next, my safe word is Pillion, written and directed by Harry Leighton. Pillion is obviously a very kinky movie, but at its core, I'd say it's about the purity of love, about the blind trust involved in offering your love to another person. One moment in particular sticks out to me when Harry Melling is so overwhelmed by his love for Alexander Skarsgård that he grabs a stick and cutely draws a heart in the air like he's Hilary Duff circa 2002 magic wanding the Disney Channel logo. Pillion's full of those smaller moments where the purity of love runs up against the realities of life, and it's all assembled pretty impressively for a directorial feature debut. 4 stars. Then off to the picturesque Utah wilderness with 1972's Jeremiah Johnson, written by John Milius and Edward Anhalt, and directed by Sidney Pollack. Robert Redford was one of the great Hollywood icons for many reasons: his renowned filmography, co-founding Sundance, his activism, and as Jeremiah Johnson illustrates, the fact that feral Robert Redford still has salon-quality hair. No matter how much his character roughs it in this resplendently shot epic, Robert's locks are immaculate. That's what I call a Hollywood icon. 4 stars. Then I watched 1940's Dance Girl Dance, written by Tess Schlesinger and Frank David, and directed by Dorothy Arzner. Dance Girl Dance has elegant storytelling, catchy ditties, and Lucille Ball at her most diabolical. I liked the original spin they put on your typical romance storylines, making them more about self-determination and self-image. Overall, a strong 4.5 stars. Up next, 2005's Munich, written by Tony Kushner and Eric Roth, and directed by Steven Spielberg. For my money, this is Spielberg's most slept-on gem. Munich is a masterclass in Spielberg's editing and camera technique, where a single shot will slickly transition from close-ups to medium shots to long shots and back again, but Spielberg knows just how to connect his shots together without cuts to create a more visually interesting and kinetically engaging single shot. Beyond the filmmaking, Munich is also maybe one of the timeliest films you could watch right now to understand how Israel lost its way and morphed into what it is today. 4.5 stars. Then an adaptation of the horniest 30 pages of Wuthering Heights, written and directed by Emerald Fennell. As a big fan of her previous 2 films, I'm surprised at how little I felt towards Wuthering Heights. I liked how it looked for the most part and a couple of the supporting performances, but beyond that, nothing else really clicked. I'd strongly recommend the 39 film version with Merle Oberon instead. 2 stars. Next, another film too horny for its own good, The Housemaid, written by Rebecca Sonnenschein and directed by Paul Feig. This was mildly intriguing in the first act before plateauing into a suspense-free romance film for way longer than makes sense. Luckily, the film remembered it was supposed to be a suspense thriller in the second half and subsequently went into a nosedive of stupidity. The last 3 or 4 scenes in particular really tried to out-stupid themselves, and not in the campy fun way I'm sure Paul Feig was hoping for. I do have to commend it though for its 2 late entries for Greatest Movie Line of 2025. I can't decide which is more iconic.
Oh, I fucking love gravy!
Or
teeth are a privilege.
Let me know if you're team teeth or gravy in the comments. 2.5 stars. Then, a Best Picture winner that's eluded me for long enough, 1934's It Happened One Night, written by Robert Riskin and directed by Frank Capra. Yeah, it's funny and endearing and charming, but it's the richly layered scene work for me. Each scene is like this perfectly coiffed, one-of-a-kind dessert that looks so stunningly delectable I almost don't want to mess it up by eating it, almost. It also has an energy all its own as one of the only screwball comedies to come out during the pre-code era where the comedy could really go wherever it wanted. Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert make for a terrific leading duo, especially in the subtler moments when they ease up on the comedy and invest wholly into the connection their 2 characters are nurturing. 4.5 stars. Up next, a Cannes Palme d'Or winner, 1969's If, written by David Sherwin and directed by Lindsay Anderson. If is a well-mannered mindfuck following a violent uprising at a boys' boarding school led by a phenomenal pre-Clockwork Orange Malcolm McDowell. The healthy dashes of surrealism in the film draw you into the emotional turmoil of the boys and help illustrate how a revolt is a fight for sanity as much as it is a fight for more practical societal changes. And did I mention how phenomenal Malcolm McDowell is? 4 stars. Then the phrase I faintly whisper into the ear of every person sitting in front of me on a roller coaster, good luck, have fun, don't die. Written by Matthew Robinson and directed by Gore Verbinski. I had some high hopes for this. Gore Verbinski is known to pull out the occasional left field banger, but pretty quickly the messy narrative and ham-fisted world building made it clear this is aiming for much lower. That said, there are some great bits of really funny dialogue work, particularly in that first act, and I did like the nice across-the-board tone they found to deal with tricky subjects like school shootings without sacrificing the energetic zaniness fueling the laughs. 3 stars. Up next, a Kurosawa deep cut with 1945's The Men Who Tread on the Tiger's Tail, written and directed by Akira Kurosawa. Clocking in just 1 minute shy of an hour, The Men Who Tread on the Tiger's Tail doesn't measure up to Kurosawa's best, but it's still a terrific snapshot of 1940s Japan and Kurosawa's strengths as a filmmaker. Under extreme financial pressure and other resource-limiting factors, like even being able to light an indoor set properly, this film had to fit into a lot of compromising boxes that didn't suit the war epic Kurosawa had already started assembling. So he pivoted brilliantly, drew on his strengths in character building and scene work, and wrote this simple, one-location film in a single night. Jesus Christ. 3 stars. Next, a disturbing doc from the creator of The Jinx, The Alabama Solution, directed by Andrew Jarecki and Charlotte Kaufman. The Alabama Solution is harrowing in its own right. The Alabama prison system is a particularly vile rat's nest of corruption and human rights violations, but the film is also a mind-numbingly one-for-one representation of all the structural atrocities being committed under the banner of ICE every day. Believing human rights are a privilege is always the first step towards irredeemable evil, and this doc illustrates that evil day in and day out. With most of the footage in the film captured on cell phones, inmates have smuggled into the prison to document the abuse and heinous living conditions they are forced to live among. Of the nominees, this would have also been my pick for the documentary Oscar this past year. Check it out. 4 stars. Then an indie favorite from last year, Sorry Baby, written and directed by Ava Victor. This was fantastic, and I'm sorry baby, it took me all these months to finally watch it. She Said Yum has already become my war cry for the year. Consider me fully seated for anything and everything Ava Victor does next. 4.5 stars. Up next, a martial arts-infused western, 2006's Exiled, written by Kem Zeto and Tenzing Yip, and directed by Johnny To. On the surface, Exiled is a particularly bloody Hong Kong action movie, but it's also a character-forward heist film, a goofy riff on the western genre, and most importantly, it's also a Red Bull can hacky-sack trick-shot compilation vid. I'm fed. 3.5 stars. Then I watched 1942's This Gun for Hire, written by Albert Maltz and W.R. Burnett, and directed by Frank Tuttle. This Gun for Hire has all the film noir red meat you could want: killers for hire, double crosses, and screwy lines like, "What's the matter? You look like you've been on a hayride with Dracula." It also has a few too many plot coincidences that really could have been ironed out with a couple more drafts of the screenplay, but I did love the wisps of a Clarice and Hannibal Lecter dynamic that Veronica Lake and Alan Ladd have going on in this. It gives the film a more modern feel and a more delectably inscrutable central nut to crack. 4 stars. Up next, Rachel McAdams' bloody return to the psychological thriller genre with Send Help, written by Damian Shannon and Mark Swift, and directed by Sam Raimi. There's some fun to be had here and 2 solid lead performances from Rachel McAdams and Dylan O'Brien. My main complaint is that it felt like this was 3 tonally different movies smushed together without much care given to how those tones work with one another. All the elements are there for a great movie, which makes the just alright result all the more disappointing. Also, even after all of that, if Rachel McAdams' character got on Survivor, respectfully, she's a textbook third out. 3 stars. Then 1971's darkly funny The Plot Against Harry, written and directed by Michael Romer. The Plot Against Harry was Curb before Curb was Curb, complete with a last shot that you can practically hear the Curb music playing over. The film follows Harry Plotnick, a small-time Jewish mobster freshly released from prison as he tries to regain control of his old gambling racket. His family, the feds, and his own aging body all get in the way, and the awkward run-ins pile on from there. It's nothing revolutionary, but it's a charming piece of forgotten 70s independent cinema that incidentally only played for 1 measly week in Seattle in '71 before being shelved, and didn't get a true theatrical release for another 18 years. 3.5 stars. Next, some Indonesian sci-fi romance with Sore, A Wife from the Future, written and directed by Yandy Lawrence. This really surprised me by popping up on some of Letterboxd's year-end 2025 lists, so I checked it out. It's a good enough film, but it's much too sweet to reach the allegorical heights it's aiming for. When the sci-fi is on the back burner and the romance elements are in the forefront, it thrives. I like the boldness of trying to meld these genres in a soft-focused, borderline soap opera style, but I don't think it had any business being on any of those Letterboxd lists. 3 stars. Then my next Bergman film with 1950s, To Joy, written and directed by Ingmar Bergman. This is the earliest Bergman film I've seen, and it definitely feels safer and more traditionally structured than his later films. I really like the way Bergman showcases the music of the film alongside the characters, how bitchy the old man conductor is, and the boldness of a husband calling his pregnant wife My Little Tubby. 3.5 stars. Next, a film that's 8 different movies Frankenstein together, 1979's Winter Kills, written and directed by William Reichert. I was in no way prepared for this very weird, hornily paranoid movie, and for that, I'm sorry. I bet this would be fantastic on a rewatch. But on a first watch, it was hard for me to find a groove with it. You're constantly bouncing from one high-stakes scene with a hazy amount of tension to another, with blatant bursts of comedy mixed in that only add to the jerkiness of scenes. But come on, where else are you gonna get Jeff Bridges, Toshiro Mifune, and Elizabeth Taylor in one movie? 3 stars. Next, a movie I saw with my grandfather, and he made clear on several different occasions that he could have handled everything better, 2013's Captain Phillips, written by Billy Ray and directed by Paul Greengrass. Tension is a fickle thing in film. In 99.9% of movies, tension builds and subsides, exciting the audience in one moment and giving them a chance to catch their breath in the next. But every now and then, a true sicko comes along and goes, what if we just gun it? Think the Safdie brothers in Uncut Gems or George Miller in Mad Max Fury Road. These massive crescendos on film are extremely hard to pull off, but if you're able to, you're left with an exhilarating ride like Captain Phillips. It's gripping, well acted, and dizzyingly shot by Barry Ackroyd. 4.5 stars. Then I watched 1986's Children of a Lesser God, written by Hesper Anderson and Mark Medoff, and directed by Randa Haynes. Why Marlee Matlin doesn't have her own Julia Child-type instructional show called The Joy of Phenomenal Eye Acting is beyond me. She's able to convey so much with the slightest change in her eyes. It's hard to imagine a more perfect pairing of an actor and a role. The film around Marlee is less dazzling, with the kind of stolid scenes you'd expect from 80s relationship drama Oscar bait. Overall, I'd give it 3.5 stars. Then another 30s Best Picture winner, 1932's Grand Hotel, written by William A. Drake and directed by Edmund Golding. If you throw in Parker Posey slurring "Piper, no," this is exactly White Lotus Season 3. Like, exactly. It's charming enough and weaves the intersecting storylines together well, not enough lorazepam though. 3.5 stars. And I wrap things up with 1995's 9 Months, written and directed by Chris Columbus. 9 Months is monumentally dumb, but fuck if I wasn't having a ball. Oh, the wonders of having an immensely charming cast, a solid director, and the freedom to pleasantly surpass low expectations as a result of no one talking about this movie anymore, ever. 3 stars. Let me know in the comments what are your thoughts on these movies, any others I should check out, are your teeth a privilege? Also stay tuned for other great commentary videos, reviews, video essays, and more. You can check me out on Letterboxd at Cineramadome24 or on TikTok at Film in the Blank. I appreciate you liking and subscribing. See you next time.